Hello, everybody, and welcome again. Thanks for tuning in, friends, family, and colleagues, to the Africa We Deserve, taking power over our lives. This is a live video cast that happens every Sunday. Three questions, 30 minutes, and a chance to build economic unity among Black people, both in the continent and in the greater diaspora. Today, I'm so thrilled that we happen to have a tech genius here with us, Brian Asenja, who is joining us. So grateful that he's here. Brian, thanks. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Viola.
Fantastic. So you're from Uganda, yes?
Yes, Uganda's, specifically in Kasese, which is on the southwest part, right on the border with Congo, DRC.
Wow, this is beautiful. So you can easily finish this statement. Africa is and her people are.
I would say Africa is the last digital frontier, and her people are the future.
Her people are the future. Absolutely. So walk us through what you're doing. You own this is a Black owned business. It's a TV streaming service. Walk us through what this is and its impact that you're looking to have on Africa and her diaspora.
Absolutely. Yeah, Dream Galaxy, which we call Dream Galaxy Academy now, because we're trying to focus more on the educational aspect, just like we're doing now. We realized that even though originally we were trying to fix the issue of lack of inclusion in media globally, we realized that education is yet another area where we often don't see ourselves in the educational material we're consuming, right? So when you look at successful entrepreneurs, when you look at successful leaders, uh, often it's a Eurocentric model that often doesn't involve a lot of people of color or other underrepresented communities, or even in Africa, for that matter, where they are the majority. The curriculum often is again from colonial times and is due for a major change. So at Dream Galaxy, we now believe that basically everybody has a story and that every story matters, and
Yeah.
that the power of storytelling is so important in helping us not only rediscover who we are, our identity, our history, our rich history, our culture, but also to be able to enable us to learn with with each other, collaborate with each other, so that we can actually face the challenges of our time and make our contribution, so that the next generation doesn't have to suffer or go through the same challenges we should. Right. So a lot of these challenges we should not leave for our generation to fix. We should give them a gift of solutions, so to
I
speak.
agree with that. That's so beautifully said. So taking over our narrative is the power of the people, because usually you find that the person who tells the story of Africa often is not the African. Um,
Absolutely.
what are you doing now, and how is your organization, your company, working to really tell the narrative?
Yeah, so when we started, we really started from the beginning. We knew we had to start from, and I do agree with you by saying that there's so many African experts that every time I'm at a conference, I'm just like, oh my God, we need to change this, right? So when we started, really, we wanted to start with just children. We believe that children are the most impacted, and it's if we're gonna make any change, we have to get to children when they're still young.
Okay.
So folk stories, we started with folk stories, children's storytelling, and really that K to 12 space in terms of curating a lot of stories from all over the world, from different cultures, from different languages, because we believe that they can start early. We're working with a Ghanaian storyteller that has an interactive comic book.
Okay.
Uh, it's print, but you can scan QR codes in the book that brings these rich Ghanaian folk tales to life, right? You're able to see in 360 view what Ghana looks like before you even visit. So I think like looking at how we use technology to bridge Ghana that might seem so far, and yet here is a child reading a book able to interact with their parent or grandparent, and they can have a conversation and even get to see what Ghana looks like. Maybe someday they get to visit, but that becomes the first step. So moving on, then we've started working with other content creators that are more in the high school, higher education kind of space. To date, we work directly with the Association of African Universities, and that's the flag. I think it's
Nice.
the flag right behind me. And so they are the leading um, higher education institution. They coordinate higher educational learning and innovation across Africa, uh, almost as a program directly commissioned by the African Union.
Okay.
And so they're also looking at education beyond 2030. How do we make sure that schools have internet connectivity? How do we make sure that there's more collaboration between African universities and US or European universities? But, and this is the part that I'm mostly interested in, that as those collaborations happen, African innovations themselves are protected, right? So that the research that comes out of that doesn't just benefit Western countries. So I think that, again, with that comes just the first step of education, right? So education around intellectual property, education around ownership,
Yeah.
education around licensing, commercialization, negotiation. So we've really come to look at education and then by extension media, ownership and distribution as being really one of the critical foundational stones that we need to transform the continent. And that's what we see as the service, right? The service being that we want to be a platform or a place where um, people like you, or we have lots of animation studios creating unique content. I just mentioned the Association of African Universities, which is again nonprofit but focused on changing higher learning in Africa.
Yeah.
We think that as we work with different content partners, instead of us creating all the content ourselves, but if we can empower other people to focus on creating the stories, to focus on the educational program, and then we focus on the distribution and giving them the analytics they need to know where their users are and what they're watching, that we will continue to be part of that conversation and actually address that first layer of information. Because often the truth is hidden from us.
Yeah.
But if we can share amongst each other what we already know, then it is within us to sort of take the next chapter, which is doing the hard work. And perhaps we will have time to talk about that.
I'm so impressed with what's happening here. Last week, we had a conversation with Ambassador Gogoa from Burundi. He's originally from Burundi, but is in Kenya right now. He's an ambassador at the African Union, focusing. He's the head of conflict prevention, and I believe that all things happen for a reason. Within reason, some all things happen for a reason, and we had a big technical glitch, and it just went blank. We could hear him, but we couldn't see his face. And so there's so much. This conversation is so rich. There's an opportunity that he brought to the table to say, hey, folks in the diaspora, Africans at home and abroad, we have some infrastructure issues that we want to get fixed. You, the diaspora, have an opportunity and a God-given birthright to return home back to where you belong and give and fix and do good business for yourself, because everybody else seems to be doing business in the continent, but we're missing out on Black Americans building legacy wealth. Really dive into that piece around building infrastructure, what your company is capable to do, and why Black Americans, because you're here in the United States, talk about your experience and why that's important to bridge with Black Americans to build Africa.
Absolutely. So I actually captured, I just finished a book called The Last Digital Frontier, which covers the history and future of science and technology in Africa. And in the book, I kind of captured the four main areas that I'm going to share here that I think are fundamental to us to even begin to move towards the Africa we want, which is the African Union new theme or mandate by 2063. And I think that the four main areas are, as I mentioned, identity, ownership, trust, and scale. So identity, we kind of touched about it in terms of continuing to know who we are through learning, through film, through interactions like conversations like this. That is important for us as a people to see ourselves as one and not separated. And we can unite around a common goal of wanting to see Africa succeed. But why is Africa's success important to the people in the diaspora, whether you're African American or whether you're a recent immigrant, whether you're from the Caribbean and now you're in the US. If you look at other demographics like Asians, right, China's success has been a good thing for them.
Mhm.
If you look at Russians, if you look at any other community, Latin Americans, I mean, when Latin American countries are doing well, or even if we just think culturally in terms of soccer, if they're having a good World Cup, there is a sense of pride globally around that.
Yeah.
If you flip that to Africa, most times, our players go to
We
play in
cheer
the
for
European,
Manchester.
yeah, in the European League, and then we don't even yes, we support them, but
Yes.
Africa doesn't get that credit, right?
Yes.
Other regions are able to capitalize on that. So the
Right.
identity is a critical piece of that. That the more we can leverage that identity to say it doesn't matter where in the world you are, if you have that African connection, those African roots, that's important,
Mhm.
that we're going to support you, but also use your image, use your success to inspire others. I think that's an important first chapter, right? Whether it's through tourism, Ghana has been a very good
Oh yeah.
example with its uh, return
Our
home
return.
campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have the return campaign bringing the diaspora to Ghana, bringing in almost billions of dollars. And I think if every country did that, or every region, East Africa, Southern Africa, West Africa, Northern Africa, we could begin to see that shift that's needed, right? So the identity piece is important. The other issue we talked about briefly was ownership.
Yeah.
Again, we can start to teach our younger, children about ownership earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Creating
ownership,
jobs. And what does that
yeah,
mean? That you have an industry that you own, that you employ people that look like you spend your dollars within communities that benefit social economically, right? Folks that look like you, and there's a power within that. We often talk about a lot of the corruption that happens here in the United
yeah,
States. We talk about the same thing, the corruption that happens. But when you are people that are sovereign and you have economic unity and sovereignty, and you're able to create, large scale, industrial business, I think that that's truly important. Please come on in with the rest of that.
yeah, absolutely. I think that ownership piece, but it's not just in, as Africa, we can say, yes, we own significant minerals. Let's process them before we export them.
Yeah.
Or we own human talent, right? Let's have, why not have the World Cup in Africa again? Why
Yeah.
not have the European League start to have uh, what they call visiting programs or summer training programs on the continent to develop that talent there? So why the tourists can come to watch soccer? And so how do we continue to own most of those processes of doing business as opposed to just exporting everything?
And you
We
have
can
a
actually,
TV network that can broadcast this. You have a
yeah,
streaming service that is, you're a child of Africa. And you have this opportunity that for me, it brings so
yeah,
much joy to my soul, because we have folks here who are looking to return home, Black Americans, Caribbeans, and others who are looking to explore Africa. And you're able to take ownership of the story so that you're able to say, your history didn't start as being a captive in this land. Your history is far richer than that. And if you can show somebody who and where they are and bring it to current day glorious
right.
Africa, as Beyonce has done, right? Where
As
she's
Beyonce has done,
yeah, as she's like, here is where we've come from, here's we are, and here's the glory of Africa as it is and the potential. You're really talking beyond this ownership of, intellectual property, but owning and crafting who you are.
yes, so the ownership to me, the identity is a theme, meaning it's not just specific to one thing.
Yeah.
The ownership is a theme. Owning your story is really
Yeah.
that's what we started with. Even as a company, what is our story? Why do we exist? As an individual, what is my story? What is my path? As a family, as
Yeah.
a community, as a school, as a government,
Hmm.
right? When we hear about Rwanda being a success story, they actually got, Rwanda has progressed more in the last 10, 15 years more than any other African country, maybe even more than some countries internationally, because they've had their 50, 100-year plan and shared that story with the country and rallied everybody behind it. And if you're foreign and you're against that plan, they will not work with you,
Mm.
right? So it starts with that vision, with that plan. And so I think a lot of times
Mm.
the stories we tell ourselves can come true. The lies we tell ourselves or the lies we allowed to be told, those can also get in the way. So
Yeah.
how do we want to redefine ourselves? That's important. But then, the last two pieces are the trust and scale of like, how do we grow this? How do we build that trust? And then how do we grow this? Because that's also still a challenge between, the diaspora and Africa, but also within Africa across the borders. So I think the trust again can be improved through this sharing of stories and information. The more we know about each other,
Hmm.
um, information around, like you mentioned, what is going on right now in the continent, is the recent ratification and actually implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which
Absolutely.
means now it's going to be easier to trade across borders. Over time, we're going to start to see some regional currencies take root. So maybe instead of thousands of currencies, we may end up with like less than 10
Can you
major
imagine that?
currencies.
What power that really is. I think for our friends, families, and colleagues that are listening who
Yeah,
don't really understand the power of Africa, you could be in Zimbabwe and you might want to travel to South Africa. You might find that it is easier to catch a plane through Europe to come back around and to
that
get
got it
there
right.
because your road doesn't work, your railway system. And so we're not putting shame or blame. We're saying that this
No,
is a structural issue that was put in place and left by colonial powers
right.
that created a system in which still Africans to this day, you would be on the same continent, but you can't cross easily, nor can you trade. There's all these rules, and that prohibited people who are one people, literally,
Yeah,
that cannot
from
do business with each other.
from doing business with each other, from supporting each other. Often, if you're importing even donated material, the tax on the computers, if you say you want to donate electronics to a school, the tax on the electronics will be so high
It's not
that
worth it.
it would not be worth donating. So those challenges are being resolved now. I think moving forward it's going to get easier because now more and more countries across Africa are saying enough. We're ready to act. We're ready to work on these rules. It may take some time, but this is the fastest they've moved forward on any major agreement. And if it wasn't for COVID, it would actually have been implemented a little bit earlier in July, but they
Yeah.
delayed it for about 30 to 60 days just to allow. So really, really exciting times. I think back to the issue of like what major things could change, right? In terms of just operationally and institution wise, I see for me three or four main areas. One is like energy,
Hmm.
right? Electricity is still a big challenge. So
Yes, it
instead
is.
of relying on like oil and other things, maybe we go directly to solar at a massive scale. Morocco is doing a really
Yeah.
good example, investing in solar across Africa. And so the beauty with solar is also it's like you can be self-reliant, right? It's not
Yeah.
like you're waiting. Well, you gotta have the sun first. Not every country is gonna have the sun, but for those that do, that's a good start. And because storage,
Yes.
battery solar energy storage is improving, the batteries are getting better. There is potential for, as you have electric cars, electric bikes, electric everything,
Yeah.
that really solar could be the new normal where you can then charge something, transport that battery to another state, another country, and they could still use that
Yeah.
when maybe they're having a winter season or rainy season. So I see energy and in particular solar being a critical piece of the puzzle that governments need to get behind. But not only that, businesses or even families don't need anyone's permission to get started to buy a solar powered lamp, a solar powered um, refrigerator or something, we can all start on that roadway. And once you have people doing that, businesses will fill in the gap. Like everything in Africa is a business opportunity, which is really the exciting thing. We just need to keep getting there. Right. So I mentioned energy. The second thing is connectivity, and that's an important one, Wi-Fi. Right. Without connectivity, it's really hard to talk to each other. A recent survey, again, by the Association of African Universities, when they evaluated how different schools were dealing with the COVID situation, about 18 to 23% of the schools were ready for online learning.
Wow.
So we still have that's again 20% of the continent.
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of schools are shut down now. A lot of students are not learning. And in areas where we already had high dropout rates, right? School has to be reimagined from being a physical space to being a process, a lifelong journey of having access to resources, to opportunities. And that's where connectivity and the internet becomes a critical play.
Mm-hmm.
Where with a platform like ours with Dream Galaxy, you can continue to learn if we can find different content partners that can continue to push this educational content. But not only that, we can then say, hey, while you're learning, what entrepreneurial project are you working on for your
Truly.
community,
Truly.
right? So that it's not just we're watching YouTube all day, but how do we go back to the community and say, wow, this is how what I'm learning applies to my community. Let me ask the guy in New York, let me ask the guy in South Africa, let me ask the guy in Nairobi how they're dealing with this issue of power, with this issue of connectivity. And I think those bridges are really, especially like here in the diaspora where, we take Wi-Fi for granted. You walk the streets of New York, there's Wi-Fi everywhere.
Yeah.
We take energy for granted. Like being able to expose the benefits and mentor these other people that may not know because we just take it for granted. Therefore, we go, what? You don't have Wi-Fi, right? So being able to say, once you have Wi-Fi, once you have power, you could do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
You can harvest more crops and store them and process them and be able to sell more milk maybe because it doesn't spoil. So I think there's a lot of learning and exchange that can happen between the diaspora and Africa. And it all, to me, all comes back to business. Yes, there's problems on the continent, but the best way to solve them is through like business models, right?
Yes.
Business models around solar, around anything. Yeah. I guess the last thing I could mention, right, um, is the expertise, which I'm gonna tie with the capital because they tend to go hand in hand, right? So funding for some of these initiatives, as I mentioned, some of them you can start small scale by focusing on families and schools or individuals. We're seeing what they're called off-grid kind of solar installation. Some of them have payment plans, so you don't have to pay upfront, but you can pay monthly until you pay back the loan for what you use to buy the solar equipment. So different models that can really work and scale. And what better way to have African Americans, to have diaspora Africans, living abroad, be the ones executing on these ideas because they can understand that maybe not everybody has a credit card. And so we're going to work with the community organization, the local cooperative, to be able to source the fund or have that saving mechanism they already have. Or maybe we're going to now support payments using mobile money because everybody is paying on their phone.
Yeah.
So being able to add that local context to the mix of the solutions is really what makes the difference because a lot of these so-called African experts come in thinking there's guaranteed power, there's guaranteed connectivity,
And there's not.
and then they come in and there's not, and then they panic, right? And then they go, well, we had this perfect plan. Well, it wasn't a perfect plan if you didn't really do your research and understand.
It didn't center on our needs, and it didn't center us as experts, as the African, as the local. And I think
Yeah,
with diaspora, Caribbean, South American, African American, wherever we are,
Brazilian, yeah,
that
whatever.
we understand that we are all we got. COVID-19 has really done a number around the globe. I hope that Africa is learning a lesson within this, that the borders are closed and they're learning to be, aid is not readily available. We can't get what you normally get. People are making masks. People have started making ventilators. People are making things and producing things of their own. So
Yeah.
there's this last question that I have here. And
Sure.
I think it's really important to one bridge what's happening in the United States. One, when I go to the continent, often there's a disbelief. You're African, and I'm like, well, yeah. I'm born someplace else. No, I can't trace my lineage. And then there's others who will say, oh, you're this, and they'll give a label of what this word means, and so there's a big discord, and there's a big thing about the revolution that's happening here in the United States, and why we're having revolution, why we're saying our humanity needs to be affirmed as Black people. We can list the hundreds upon hundreds of Black people who have lost their lives to systematic violence 400 years ago and present today.
Pleasure. Yeah.
So, what is Dream Galaxy doing to showcase the revolution for Black America, to tell their story to the continent of Africa? And the second part of that question, Asenja, are you ready to go into the continent to do work, to bring your company and offer up its service to create an end to the digital divide?
Absolutely. So I'll start with the first part, which is the revolution, and I'll end with what we're doing in the continent and how we can continue to work there. Um, they say the revolution will not be televised, but in our case, I think it will, because that is exactly what we're doing. We are definitely beginning to curate series, and again, the Association of African Universities is already doing this, just curating and interviewing entrepreneurs and capturing their stories as they're doing this work, right? So rather than waiting for people to be successful, how do we normalize innovation so that we are sharing the people that are doing things? Because often that's what we need to be inspired. That's one. We've been talking with blackfacts.com, which is one of the leading historical sites here that has a lot of insight around African American history, innovation, important dates, on how both they can promote our platform, but also we can look to them for research and content moving forward. Those are ongoing conversations, but already I feel like we've been in a good place based on the conversation so far. And lastly, just around the issue of the revolution, I do think that media, and in particular education, is an important piece of that revolution. And that is exactly why we want at least a majority ownership in the company. We look at this as a legacy kind of business, because we want to pass this down to our children. And if you look at historically, there's a very low history of successful Black institutions surviving for long. So I don't know how I'm going to do it, but my goal is to break that cycle.
Yes.
And it takes a village, and that's why we're working through a partnership model by working with these other institutions, so that it's not just us. Their success is our success is theirs. And I think so far so good. We just started. We're barely less than 5 years old or something like that. But I want to see the 20, 50-year journey, and then we will see what our kids say we did.
Totally.
And lastly, as far as our commitment to the continent, absolutely, we've been ahead of it. In 2016, we incorporated the subsidiary called Dream Galaxy Digital, Dream Africa Digital, limited in Nairobi, Kenya, which is where my business partner is from. We've sent about 30 teachers from Nairobi to go there to do teacher training on how they can use storytelling and technology, with another organization called Travel and Give. I think you can see their organization logo right there on the left. So I think like through this work, we've really seen doors begin to open, because as people learn about these opportunities, they wanna participate, but often they don't know how. And so the how is the advice, and the strategy aspect of it is what we're beginning to consult on more, to say, we know you have the talent, or maybe you have the capital, the money, but how do you make sure you're putting it in the right place? How do you make sure you're creating the most change? And so I think being able to advise on that, because I have a background in technology. I studied electrical computer engineering, used to work at the New York Stock Exchange, helping them automate their trading. I see that the value that I can provide for those wanting to do business in Africa, for governments trying to modernize their economies and open up their markets to the world. That is that combination between technology, but also the society, so that the technology is benefiting people. And I do think we have that expertise, but not only that, over time, we can bring in the network as well. So,
Fantastic. Ashinja, tell me, what do you know?
what I do know is that Africa is the future and that the future is created yesterday. So we have to start doing the hard work now. And that means addressing the fundamental issues before we jump into the hype. Issues around energy, issues around connectivity, issues around travel, the visa things, and that's being addressed through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And so what we're looking to work with other partners or governments is really around formulating 5-year, 10-year roadmap plans around how they can resolve these issues, because it can't just be a different plan for every political party.
Yeah.
That's one. And second, bringing in the right partners, you know, the right partners, especially people like us who know how to do these things, who are not going to run away maybe once the money runs out, but are actually going to design things that can fund themselves moving forward. So I think what we do know is how to do things and do them right. And we're always looking to work with other people.
I am so happy that we had this chance to have a conversation. It has brought so much joy to my heart. And I'm sure for our viewers, our listening audience, that their minds are spinning too around opportunities to connect with you. So, how do people connect with you?
Yeah, the easiest way is to really start with social media, and then I'll list some websites as well, because they all link to each other. My personal handle on any social media site is at Brian Asinja, which is my name, and you might see it on the stream later. The streaming site for Dream Galaxy Academy is at I Trust Culture. And again, that will link you to the site, which you're seeing a part of the screenshot on the screen in the background. And all those, once you're on, you can email us, or there's ways you can contact us, or we'll have added you to our newsletters as well. So I'm always available. My hashtag is literally Ask a Sinja. So you can hashtag that too if for those that tweet or post on Instagram. And we are a digital company. We love technology. Let's connect online. But the hard work has to be done on the ground, on the continent, but also here. And so I think there's need for both businesses in both places, because often, even for financial reasons, American companies are more trustworthy to sort of get the big checks. So I think we need to collaborate to make sure that African companies are not being sidelined because they don't have the credit history and all these other things. But yeah, in summary, at Brian Asinja for my personal or the advisory side of things, and then at I Trust Culture for the streaming educational platform. And we're always looking for content, and we're ready to do business anywhere in the world.
Fantastic. For our listening audience, thank you for joining us again this Sunday. This is a conversation that we have every Sunday. 3 questions, 30 minutes, and a chance to impact economic unity. We're taking power over our lives, and we are calling and building the Africa we deserve. Until next Sunday, everybody, have a good rest of your day.
Yeah.